It is the voice of the NFL on NBC. It is Cris Collinsworth, Bengals legend as well. Chris, we thank you so much. And obviously, in homage of the great Jim Donovan, and you guys go way back. And for all that you've accomplished in your career, it all started with Jim. Your first game is with Jim. What can you tell us about those early days and perhaps even that first game?
I just say thank God Jim Donovan was my partner, because I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I mean, none. And if you know Jim at all, he's like the sweetest guy in the world. And I needed more patience with me during that time than you can possibly imagine. So I showed up at the hotel. And nobody's like, they don't teach you how to do it. So I'm writing the names of the players on a manila envelope, like I could fold open and flip over, right? And so I'm sitting there, and I was like, all right, at least I've got something going on here. And then David Michaels, who's Al Michaels' brother, was our producer for that game, came walking in, and he knocked on the door, came in, and he goes, so how you preparing? What are you doing? And I showed him my manila envelope, and he was like, oh, my God. Just like, oh, this is going to be a disaster. How did I get stuck with this guy? So he had been working with Terry Bradshaw, and Bradshaw sent over some boards that he had made up or whatever. But Jim Donovan never blinked. Never with me. I'm just telling you, it was like he was my long-lost brother. Bob Costas beat me up badly on the pregame show because I was so nervous I could barely talk. And we did a rehearsal, and it was just horrendous. And Jim just kept telling me how good I was going to be once we get on live air. And so, I mean, every time I went to Cleveland, we did the Hall of Fame game, I think it was last year. And I go up and just got a chance to go back and spend like an hour with Jim, just sitting and talking and remembering, that whole crazy, and it wasn't the only time that we worked together, but for me, I mean, we literally did whatever was the last, because I was the worst announcer, so they put me on the worst game. We only got to work if they had like 8 games on NBC that day, and he just, like, every game just taught me something new and different, and did all the supporting work. And now that I know what I didn't know then, I thank God all the time that Jim was my first partner, because he was just so amazingly patient with me.
Well, Chris, you and I have one thing in common. We both did our first games ever with Jim Donovan, and both wrote our initial boards on manila envelopes, because I found out basically as we were boarding a plane to London, England, that Deke was not going to be able to go, and I did that back in 2017. I still have my manila envelopes. I don't know if you still do as well, but my wife, my sweet wife, got those framed in a picture of Jim, which is obviously a very special thing in my house. Should also tell you that you're my wife's favorite announcer by far, and she is not like an announcer person. She's just like, oh, Chris, I told her you were going to be on the show. She's like, no way. She was very excited, so I had to get that out there for you. Did Jim ever, do you recall maybe one piece of advice that is something that has kind of stuck with you as you've obviously become, one of the preeminent, if not the preeminent color commentators in the league, but just something that, he said that stuck with you?
Just smile. Like, at the end of it, you're in a relationship with millions of people who are looking, those people all work for a living, right? They don't have a chance to spend all week. I mean, imagine our jobs, which are to watch football all week. How many people would kill to have that job, right? Yeah. Just watching football all week. Are you crazy? He goes, just take advantage of it. Just smile and act like you're the luckiest guy on earth, and it'll come across, and people will respect it, and they won't remember your mistakes. They'll remember whether they like you or not. It took a little while for anybody to like me, but it was great advice. And Jim lived that every day for his entire life, and it's the reason that he's thought of in our business the way that he is. And it doesn't have to be whether you're Al Michaels or Joe Buck or whoever else there is, Mike Tirico. they all know people like Jim Donovan who have devoted their life to it, who, for whatever reason, by the grace of God, they got lucky breaks and got to go on to the national thing. But Jim just became a beloved treasure in one place, in Cleveland. And I think probably at that time in my career, he probably helped keep me alive because we did a lot of Browns games at that time. And he would walk around like I was a proud friend no matter what anybody was shouting at me or saying I didn't like the Browns or whatever it was. He was like my personal bodyguard, even though I was a little taller than he was.
Chris, talking to the legendary Cris Collinsworth, of course, of NBC, and worked with Jim early on in his career, obviously, at NBC at that time. How cognizant were you, son? Obviously, you hear of his passing on Saturday, and that rocks you. We had Mike on earlier in the week, and he kind of talked about that. But how cognizant were you of, as you were preparing for your game on Sunday Night Football, of what happened here against Baltimore and the miraculous nature of that?
Well, I'm a little bit of a faithful guy, so sometimes I think there is a little intervention. And I just remember watching the end of that game and going, God, I mean, not that I'm cheering against Baltimore or cheering for the Browns, but man, I'm kind of cheering for the Browns here a little bit. I wanted that win, and I know the Browns wanted it and they needed it and all those things. And I was, happy for Jameis. He played a great game, but I was just really happy that somebody was going to be thinking about Jim after that win. There was almost no way that you could sit and watch that game and not think that Jim had his finger on the scale to tip it just a little bit, like every good thing that was happening to the Browns and that last touchdown pass. And I go, there's my man, got his hands on the scales again. Go get him. But, yeah, I was definitely thinking about him.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, and we thank you so much for your words on that Sunday night broadcast as well about Jim. But yeah, I had the pleasure of doing that game, and at one point, I think after the Kyle Hamilton dropped the interception, I was just like, I am telling you, This is something else at work here. We had a field goal go in off the uprights. Tucker has one that just kind of pushes left at the end. They're dropping balls in the sun. It was wild, the confluence of events that led to that, and that's exactly what it felt like for Jim. And I appreciate that, we had Jim Nantz on earlier today, and he goes, you root for people, and in that case, you're rooting for the Browns. You're rooting for Jim Donovan to have that proper send-off, and that's what he got. And that's why sports can be so special. I call it, can be the great unifier. And on that day for the Browns, as you talked about, had been struggling. There had been, talks about the players and the fans and, beef there. And Jim Donovan brought everybody together on one day and produced a great win. And as you would say, he helped bring people together for years, right, in that booth alongside you, and then certainly here with his time with the Cleveland Browns.
Well, and I think he set the tone for Browns fans in general. Like, it's so easy to be, a fair-weathered fan. And there's a lot of places where that's really true. But when I think of Cleveland, I never think of that. I mean, those people are Browns fans, right? I mean, it doesn't matter. Like Pittsburgh, they're Steelers fans. Doesn't matter what the record is. You don't have to talk people into being Browns fans. But what you do have to do is you have to sort of nurture people through the bad years. And certainly we've seen those in Cincinnati here as well. And you have to make them remain fans and have a twinkle in your eye despite whatever the losing record might have been or the tough loss might have been. And I just don't know of anybody in sports who probably could have done that any better than Jim Donovan, because even when he was as sick as he was, when he came out to see me, it was like a newborn baby coming. I mean, he you would have never thought or known that he was sick. I a couple of times sort of loosely tried to bring it up, and he just went right back to some happy subject and talking about the good old days of the Browns or whatever the case may be. He didn't have a negative bone in his body, and so I was really sad. I know we tried to get on with you guys on Monday that I couldn't do it. I was flying back from wherever we were, San Francisco. But it means a lot to me that you guys would call and ask and want me to be on the show, because he's a special guy, and I know he'll be remembered for a long, long time there.
We can't thank you enough for doing so and sharing your unique experience with Jim and giving us a little bit of your time. I know you're obviously very, very busy, but thank you very, very much, Chris. Really appreciate it.
Oh, Nathan, really a pleasure. Anytime you guys need me, let me know.